Journes, thanks so much for joining me for today's podcast and conversation. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Thank you so much for having me.
it's a pleasure. Yeah, I'm really excited to dive into this topic around coaching and highly sensitive people with you. Um, yeah, I guess to start us off, I was wondering what's your kind of personal story or experience of being an HSP? So how did you kind of discover it, and what's been your journey?
Sure. Well, I wasn't familiar with the term highly sensitive person until within the last 2 years. But obviously, it's something I've always felt. I've always been really interested in like the larger questions in life and a lot of self reflection, introspection. I'm drawn to very spiritual kind of concepts. I'm really into yoga.
Mm,
And I knew that I needed to seek these things to find balance in my life.
mm,
I grew up in a very small town in the Midwest of America. And so being an HSP there was really difficult.
mhm.
It was kind of a very traditionalist cultural background. And there was always something that didn't quite sit right with me about, the roles we're supposed to be taking on. It just didn't quite fit. Like I didn't quite fit into the box. And so that catapulted my educational journey. I got a degree, my undergraduate degree in anthropology, which is comparing other cultures and how other people view themselves in the cultural matrix and how cultures shape who we are as people. And then I took on a nurturing role. I was a nanny for special needs for about 5 years, and I loved it, which sent me on a new trajectory to become an occupational therapist.
Mm,
And that's what I was doing up until COVID hit. I was working with pediatric patients who have sensory processing disorder.
right.
And I really, really connected with them. And I think part of that is because I understand the overwhelm. There's a
Mm,
lot of misconceptions about kids who have sensory processing disorder and kids who have autism.
yeah.
I just feel like a special connection. And so when COVID hit, I had all the plans and foundations laid for me to start my own in person clinic for pediatric patients. But then everything went online. And so I had to make a new plan
Yeah.
and started researching what are some of the underserved populations. And I found that adults with sensory processing disorder, there's a huge gap in treatment available for them. And as I kind of dug through that rabbit hole,
Mhm.
I recognize too, there's a lot of adults out there who don't know how to process emotion and overwhelm and reduce stress. And with my background as a yoga instructor and as an OT, I thought, what a perfect fit. I can create a system to help people, first of all, manage stress and then also do some introspection, find out what their limiting beliefs are and how they can get themselves to where they want to be. So
Mm,
I've been in the online space for just past 6 months.
okay,
Yeah, and it's been fun.
amazing. What a journey. So yeah, really cool. And so picking up on that then, what inspired you to become a coach in so you mentioned kind of moving into this space with to help people with sensory processing. Wondered if you could expand a bit on that, on what inspired you to become an HSP coach.
Yeah, totally. Good question. So here in the States, there's a lot of gray area in the online therapy space.
Mhm.
And the way that our laws are set up right now is if I were to continue being a therapist, I would only be able to reach people who are in my state. And so therapy is a lot about focusing on, what happened to you in the past.
Mhm.
And coaching is a lot more about where you are presently and where you are. It's more future oriented, right? So because I had to pivot online, it made way more sense for me to reach people through coaching,
Mhm.
especially during such a tumultuous year when people are having a really hard time managing stress in the right now.
Mm.
And so that's kind of how I pivoted. It was a strategic business decision, but it was also me reflecting on my own journey and what tools I have established to help me manage the stress and help me feel balanced in my own life. I just saw an opportunity to teach other people those skills with kind of a scientific rationale to
Mm.
get them really invested in making some daily micro habit changes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Yeah. And so how long have you been working in as a coach then?
So I just passed 6 months.
Right.
So
Yeah.
So just over 6 months as a coach. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And in that time, what have you learned from coaching highly sensitive people? Are there any kind of behaviors or patterns that you've noticed?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, and this kind of connects to your previous question. I went into helping people with sensory processing sensitivity, another way to say HSP,
Yeah.
because of this, my sensory background.
Hmm.
So I entered the space thinking I can help people manage overwhelm from sensory overload. But what I found, like within probably the first month or two, was that people really wanted more help with the emotional component.
Hmm.
And so I began marketing towards highly sensitive people and empaths.
Yeah.
So empaths are by nature highly sensitive people, but a lot of them don't necessarily have the term for it. They don't, because empath is kind of like this mainstream buzzy word, but HSP is relatively unknown. And even coming from a therapeutic background, I had no idea HSP was a thing until
Yeah.
recently.
Right.
Yeah. So what I really learned is that people have my community and the people, my clients that I've talked to, we often empathize to the point where it is an energetic drain on our own
Hmm.
system, our own nervous system. And so I work a lot with my clients with setting appropriate boundaries
Hmm.
and making sure that we're not overgiving as our tendency to do, to overgive
Yeah.
to the point of depletion, but to find more balance. And then again, just like the daily maintenance that it takes to support our nervous systems. We have very sensitive, special circuitry that needs a little bit extra maintenance, a little bit extra care. And once those little foundational tools are set, I feel like it just sets you up for success in every single area.
Hmm. Amazing. Yeah, I love
So
what.
those are some of the bigger, yeah, those are some of the bigger things that we work on. And of course, it's personalized. So whatever that my client has as a vision for their future, wherever they're trying to get, we can break it down and really get into the nitty gritty of it.
Yeah, nice. I love what you say about balance and helping people find this balance with their nervous system. I think it's so important because especially with high sensitivity, I guess there's a chance to be overwhelmed and to have a lot of things going on, and so to help people to find that balance sounds like a really important kind of part of the process. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and I wondered, do you have any tools or resources for highly sensitive people that you'd recommend?
Oh yeah, a million. But kind of the basic few to just cover your bases,
Yeah.
at least in my personal experience and what I lead my clients through is having time and space in your schedule to just process.
Mm,
Like just as a time out where you can kind of shut down your senses, you're not taking in any more information, you're just mindfully sitting with what is existing in your experience at this moment, mindfulness practice,
mhm,
and just becoming more aware of what your physiological cues are for stress.
mhm.
So that's where I start. If my clients are having a hard time with stress or they're kind of stuck in the survival mode, we always start with that foundation of a mindfulness practice.
Mm,
Another lovely thing that I like to incorporate is yoga, because yoga has helped me so much in my journey. It's another way to connect and really infuse our bodies with love, get really curious about what the energetic experience really feels like,
mhm.
and how to process and release stress and disturbances in our emotional state. So mindfulness, yoga, and again, just like that just having some time to decompress, get enough rest.
Mm,
There's more, obviously. Be mindful of what you're putting into your brain.
mhm.
Be careful of what media you're consuming. Set
Yeah.
up your environment to be peaceful and less overstimulating. There's a lot of different little things that you can change that really accumulate to a big difference in your own health.
Mm, I love that. Yeah. So many good tips in that. Um, yeah, one of them that sticks with me is what you're putting into your body. So also food and then what you're consuming in terms of information, I think is a big one, especially when you have so much choice and so many things to kind of so many options out there. Uh,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, and that's important for everyone, but especially important for us with sensitive nervous systems.
mm,
Like food is your medicine. It's how um, you set your nervous system up for success. And of course, exercise is a basic component: diet, exercise, rest. These are the big three. But it's often hard to actually kind of employ that or find a strategy that works, or find, because we live in a really busy, chaotic world.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it just takes a really concrete plan to make those things really happen for you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned like this idea of having a concrete plan. So if I'm a client coming to you, what's the process? How do you kind of figure out, what they need or what the next best steps are?
Yeah, good question. So I teach to focus on the process and not the goals. It's
Mm,
good to have like a vision and some goals. I want to feel this type of way because the feeling is what's really motivating for people to make these changes.
mm,
So connect to that feeling, anchor into how you would want to feel, and then just start really small baby steps
mhm,
and make them very measurable and very concrete. And
mhm.
by that, I mean, give it a time of day, give it a location where you're going to practice it, and give it a duration. So you want to make sure that it's realistic. You don't want to go from not having a mindfulness practice to I'm going to sit down for 20 minutes a day and just be there. That's way too much,
Yeah,
and you're not setting yourself up for success. But
right.
always just baby steps. It should be within your zone of comfort. Like, I think I can sit down for 30 seconds and just breathe.
Mm,
So start with that.
mhm.
I'm going to wake up and I'm going to breathe while I make my coffee in the morning,
Yeah,
in the kitchen. So you're giving it a time, duration, location, super easy. And then from there, you can begin to expand on more things that you want to incorporate, more ways to find that balance.
mm, nice. Yeah, that
And
sounds.
that would be, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Josh.
No,
Yeah, that would be
no.
applied. That same process can be applied to work, to sleep, to diet, but really breaking it down into real small steps, I think, is the key.
Yeah, yeah, I love that because it makes it feel much more manageable. Because if someone says to me like, "Oh, I want you to sit down for 20 minutes," like you said, it's kind of overwhelming, especially when you have a
Mhm.
lot of thoughts going on and like busy mind. The idea of just sitting there with the thoughts and trying to fix something, or feeling like I need to fix something, is quite challenging. So I love this idea that you have of a very tangible, like, start small, give it a location, a time. Um, yeah, it makes it feel a lot more kind of manageable, which is really good. Um,
Totally. Yes, and if I could just say too, I think a lot of us have this, idea of what mindfulness practice is, and it's, having the idea that you need to shut off your mind, like
mhm,
you need to fix something's wrong and you need to fix it.
mhm,
But really, I have found much more powerful is the concept of self compassion. And
mhm,
so the more we learn about how our physical and emotional bodies work through, scientific research, or through yoga, or through any form of introspection,
yeah,
the easier it is to really be compassionate and understand that this is my human brain wiring and this is how I am. And the more I learn about it, the more I can fine tune and really tap into the power of it.
yeah,
Because as highly sensitive people, we have a lot of energetic power. It just is a matter of like learning how to approach it in a different way. And
mm,
society doesn't really encourage us to approach it in a healthy way, which
yeah,
is unfortunate.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, it makes me think as well that a lot of focus is on the challenges for highly sensitive people. So, around like what's difficult and what's challenging. But then you've also got this other side of the coin, which is like an amazing opportunity. Like you mentioned, all this energy to give, and sensitivity, and being able to tune into other people's emotions. And so you have all this kind of amazing opportunity as well with being sensitive, which I think is interesting, and something that we can give more to, because it can be a very positive trait.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's been kind of a mass shaming around intuition, which is one of our greatest strengths. And so even just reclaiming that power can be a process in itself,
Mm,
because we're kind of told, like, we're kind of oftentimes taught not to trust our feelings. or that our feelings are wrong or bad. And so we get into the cycle of repressing them or not expressing them because we're afraid of how society is going to respond to that. But if we can kind of shed some of those layers of who we think we're supposed to be or what society's expectations of us are, the more we can really learn to trust those gut feelings, because our gut's like our second brain. We have a ton of nerve endings there. It's like its own nervous system, really.
Yeah.
And so if we can learn to just read our emotional state and respond to our emotional state instead of react, we are so powerful. So I love teaching that to people. Like, we are special. We're special people.
Yeah, I love that. I love what the words you use were respond rather than react. I think that's such a lovely kind of phrase to remember, because it's about responding from a place of awareness rather than feeling like you're reacting to something that you're not in control of. I think that's such a beautiful point to make.
Yeah.
Respond.
Yeah. And
Mm,
when we're riding that roller coaster of like stress response,
yeah.
when you're triggered, your logical brain literally just goes offline. Like your frontal lobe here is just offline,
Yeah.
and so you can't really think rationally. So a big part of the process is, like you said, just becoming aware. This is my energetic experience right now. It's not going to last forever. I'm just having this emotion, and can I get curious about it instead of acting on it right away?
Mm. Yeah, can I get curious about it? And then you start to understand it in a different way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and you mentioned yoga a couple of times when you were speaking earlier, and I was a bit curious to kind of dive into how that practice has helped either you or your clients with maybe self development or self understanding, or what's been that piece of the puzzle for you?
Ah, thank you for asking
Yeah.
this. I love yoga. Yoga is like my number one favorite passion. I spend so much time and just delving into it because it's such a deep and complex practice.
Mm,
There's always more to learn, and that's what keeps it exciting.
yeah.
But for several reasons that I use it with my clients, connecting to the body, connecting to the experience, growing that awareness of what's present in this moment,
Mm,
growing the awareness of what your energetic boundaries are, growing awareness of what your stress response feels like so you can catch it before you get into that overloaded state. So a lot of like physiological monitoring,
mm,
um, just to kind of learn to breathe deeply with your diaphragm and trigger the parasympathetic response.
mhm.
So on a physical level, it's a beautiful practice for anyone to have, especially considering we're not really taught in schools how to regulate our emotions.
Yeah.
Yoga gives you access to regulating your emotions and your physical state.
Mm,
It's also, so there's sensory seekers, right? I myself am a sensory seeker, highly sensitive sensory seeker. So
yeah.
in my personal practice, yoga has always been a really good way for me to get the input I need to regulate, get
Mhm.
like some of that really heavy sensational input.
Mm,
Um, there's so many different styles of yoga.
yeah.
So it's can really be tailored and personalized to what you're experiencing. If you have a super busy mind and you're having a hard time even sitting down for a mindfulness practice, you
Mhm.
can try vinyasa flow, which is really quick paced movement and you're listening to cues. And so it's kind of like they're doing the thinking for you and you can get out of your mind and into your body.
Mm,
If you really need restoration and you're just exhausted, but you still want to give your body some love, restorative yoga is a really good fit for you,
mhm.
because you're setting your body up and positioning your body in ways that allow it to heal and stretch and release some of the tension.
Mhm.
And if you need space for introspection, you can try a hatha yoga class, which is kind of a slower flow. So I love yoga because it's so applicable to almost everything. And in the area of like just noticing what's there, we also sometimes our beliefs and our emotions come to the surface.
Mhm.
So we have revelations on the mat that
Mm,
we take off of the mat and into our daily lives. So like for a concrete example, one of the biggest lessons I've learned through my yoga practice is my tendency to push myself too hard and be really impatient with myself.
mm,
I've hurt myself too many times that now I know, okay, you have a tendency of being very impulsive, you're competitive, you want to get into that position, but you need to dial it back and be compassionate with your body and
mhm.
meet your body where it's at.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I also take off the mat and into my life. A lot of us have this tendency to push too hard when we're feeling good
Mm,
and we want to get stuff done and we want to be productive, and then we end up depleted.
mm,
So those are just some of the ways that we can kind of use our yoga practice to really identify what's living in our belief system, our energetic system, our emotional system, and how can we begin to shift that in ways that are going to help us over the long term or
mm.
help us find more balance in our day-to-day life. I
Yeah.
hope that answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely. No.
Yoga ranting.
There's so much in there. Yeah, so much in there. And I love the passion with which you speak about the yoga practice. I think what stands out for me is like the way you explained it as building awareness. I think is so powerful because it's about awareness of, you know, what's going on in your mind but in your body, uh,
Hmm.
through a practice that you can do every day. And then this idea that you can learn and have revelations on the mat and then bring them into your, you know, your daily life. And I love that the way you describe that is so tangible to me. I'm like, yeah, I get that. That makes
Hmm.
sense to me. Because I
And
think
it's such
I,
a,
yeah.
go
um
ahead.
oh yeah, no, I think I also have the tendency you mentioned to like to be pushing yourself when you're feeling good. And I think I have that, and I have a busy mind. So this idea of, you know, learning through the practice and then taking that to your everyday life, I love that. um,
Totally. Yes. Thank you. And I would be curious to hear your thoughts too on how you think this pairs with coaching, because in coaching, often teaching our clients that 95% of our behaviors are subconsciously driven. They're like our programming that's been instilled into us,
mm,
as we grew up and we're conditioned and all of these things. That's really driving the ship most of the time.
mm,
And so through some of these embodiment practices, we have a direct access to what's in our subconscious. So
mm.
I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that, and how you see that as in your coaching practice with your clients.
The embodiment piece, or
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's so fascinating, and it's such an important area for growth, I think. So I'm quite new to embodiment practices. So when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time in like the headspace.
Mm.
So like lots of deep thought, lots of like writing and essays and analysis and strategy. And I took that forward into my kind of adult life. And and then I started to like neglect that sense of like being connected to your body. So I'd be
Mhm.
sitting a lot and doing like PhD work and thinking a lot. And then it got to a point when my body was like, oh, like don't forget me. And I kind of gently started to bring it into more of my everyday life. So doing like some stretching and some jogging, and it really helped me to reconnect to that kind of the body, and then through that more to the emotions and the feelings as well. So the bodily sensations and what my body was telling me. And I
Mm.
think I'm starting to understand how to bring that into the coaching practice now, but but I'm quite new to that process. But it's about, for me, it's like one way is looking at people's body language, so seeing
Mhm.
how they're kind of, what are they telling you under the surface of what they're saying with their body, like how they speak and how they move is one way. um, I did a session with a somatic coach who focuses just on body as the entry point. So you kind of, it's like ground up. So body first and then mind. And that was fascinating. She was really great at tapping into, you know, what is the body trying to tell you. And I thought that was so important and so powerful, especially with coaching, because coaching can be very cognitive. So it can be very kind of analytical and in your brain. And I think to be able to bring people's awareness to, you know, how does it feel in your body, even like a question like that can really open up doors to more awareness, more understanding, um, and connection to emotions. I think for me is a big one.
Mm.
uh,
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
I'm wondering too, sorry, I kind of flipped the
Yeah,
this back on you, but
yeah, let's
do you feel as a highly sensitive person that you're very it's more natural for you, or you have an inclination to read people's body language? Was that always something that you were consciously aware of, or is that something that you just kind of started recognizing in yourself recently?
um, I think the coaching practice has helped me to focus in a bit more deeply on what's going on in someone else's world. And
Hmm.
then a part of that story is what's the body language. I think as a sensitive person, I think I always picked up on like what's the feeling, like what's going on, but I'd never really like consciously linked it to the body language. I'd never thought, oh, they're doing this with their body. It's like that's what they're telling me. It was
Hmm.
more like a feeling that I would pick up on, like a vibe or a general kind of sensation of, how are they doing. And this coaching training that I've gone through has helped me narrow and focus down a little bit more on, okay, so now you're picking up on this feeling. What else, what other signs or signals or indicators are there to work with? So it's almost like data, like emotional data. It's like, what can you learn from the client? What do they need? What's going on in their world? And that's kind of how I see it. So body language is just one element or dimension that I found useful. Um, yeah, and then also I was speaking with my friend who's also a coach, and she made a nice point that was like showing, like, giving someone awareness of their body language is something they can't do for themselves necessarily, because
Hmm.
sometimes it's like you do it at an unconscious level. So,
Yeah.
so she was saying that was one of the values of coaching, is that a coach could point that out and say, "Oh, I notice, when you talk about that person that you close off, or as something like that." So I think it's the body language is a value potentially that we can give to our clients. Um, yeah.
100%, yeah. And for anyone listening to this too, it's kind of a fun little experiment to just start noticing what people's body language is saying to you.
Mm,
Because like you said, it's a lot easier to notice it in other people than it is to reflect it back to
yeah.
ourselves. And that's why coaching is so powerful, because we act as a mirror to really help people key in on what their body is saying. Um, but if you're listening to this and that's interesting, like body language is fascinating body of research, and the more you learn about it, the more you pick it up in like the people around you, and
Yeah.
then it becomes easier to kind of notice what your body language is saying. What are you saying to the room, and are you closing off, or are you feeling open-minded? And that can be an indicator of where you might need to find some more balance, or where you're having a lot of success in managing your own emotional state. So
Mm,
that's really cool.
yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Yeah. So I was curious, what are your three key takeaways for highly sensitive people? And maybe we covered some already, or maybe they're new, but just to kind of give people some takeaways. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so like my three biggest tips that I teach my clients, we always start with time,
Mm,
making sure you have some time and some space to yourself. Make
mm,
sure you have, just time to process everything that your body has been taken on. And that could be through like even just laying down and resting. It could be through a mindfulness practice. It could be through a yoga practice. Just make sure you're giving yourself some time.
mm,
So that's my very first suggestion.
yeah.
Um, the second one is don't be afraid to get really critical about what your social conditioning has taught you.
Mm,
Don't be afraid to get critical about what your beliefs and your thoughts are. You don't have to believe all of your thoughts. And it's worth kind of investigating what kind of beliefs you're holding on to and which ones are not really serving you. Can you start to shift some of those? So
mm,
for example, we have this belief. I think a lot of us hold this belief that if I'm not doing something, I'm not being productive, then I'm wasting my time.
Mm,
right? That can be like a big pill to swallow. But if we can start recognizing that we hold these beliefs and then deconstructing them, like, where did I pick this up? Why is this relevant? Do I believe this? Did I choose to believe this? Or was it programmed into me? And can I choose something that feels better and more in alignment with myself?
mm,
So give yourself time.
yeah.
Do some reflection on your social conditioning and what beliefs you're holding on to.
Mm,
And then my third top tip is like being super mindful of what you're taking in. So we talked a little bit about that. What are you taking in through your food? What are you taking in through your media consumption? What are you taking in from your relationships around you? And are there ways that you can find more balance so you're not getting sucked into kind of this negative or like narrative of lack, um, negativity, lack, anxiety, survival mode stuff?
mm,
Can you begin to shift into more maybe positive messaging or inspiring messaging or learning about yourself to really start fostering and cultivating that self-love and that self-respect?
mm. Beautifully said. Yeah, thank you. So amazing. So time was your first, and then we had you look at your like beliefs or limiting belief system, and then the third one
The
was
third one, be mindful of what you're taking,
mindful of what
your
you're
environment, I should
saying.
say.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, thank you. No, I think those are so important and they're so powerful. Yeah, and when I think about all three of them as well, it makes me feel more spacious. It's like I get this kind of like, oh, that's a really holistic way of like almost self-care or self-compassion or self-love. Um, yeah, just a great approach. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there are thousands of other ways that you can support yourself, and coaching is one of those. And we're out here to support you. So, yeah, I would just encourage anyone who's listening who wants more information. It's out there.
Mm,
So much free information out there. Give some time and space to research more about it if you're struggling.
yeah, yeah. No, that's such a good point. And yeah, support. One thing that popped into my mind was you mentioned you had a Facebook group or Facebook community, um, and I just wanted to make people aware of that. Um, that
Yeah.
they're not alone and they can join. You know, they can join the group and um, be a part of that if they're they feel the call to find like-minded people. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. So, anyone listening, you are so welcome to just look me up on Facebook, Journé Domek. I'm sure that my name will be written in the show notes.
yeah,
It's kind of a weird one. So, Journé Domek, or you can join my Facebook group, which is called Empowered Sensitivity. I have a really nice community in there. We have a lot of discussions. There's a lot of coaching. There's a lot of guest coaches who come in, and it's really an effective way of getting information so that we're kind of facilitating, right? Like, we're taking the Google work out of it for you and we're bringing it to you. So
mhm,
if that's interesting to you, we would love to have you there. I'd love to meet you.
mm, brilliant. Thank you. So yeah, we're kind of coming towards a close of our conversation, and I wanted to just leave the door open in case there was anything else you wanted to talk about or cover or say before we kind of wrap things up. Not that there has to be, but just so that yeah, you feel like there's anything that I missed or didn't really ask you that was on your mind.
Sure. Well, I want to share, if you're interested in yoga specifically, I do a lot of my work through the chakra system, which is just like a really good guidebook into introspection. And
Mm,
it covers physical, emotional, and mental health
mhm,
just by working through the framework. And so if that's something you're interested in, again, you can reach out to me, but I also would recommend um, Carolyn Miss's book, Anatomy of the Spirit, which has completely changed my life.
mm,
And Anna Dea Judith is another author, and her books have completely transformed my perspective on my own health. So if
mm.
you're a big reader and you're interested in those topics, just wanted to offer a couple of book suggestions.
Brilliant. Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Johnny.
So welcome.
Yeah, Johnny, it's been such a pleasure chatting to you, and I feel like we've been on a bit of a journey. So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing, and thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, real pleasure. And I'll link all of your details below the podcast and the YouTube so that anyone looking to connect can find you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thanks again.